How's it going, guys? Today we are looking at Purdue basketball heading into the 2024-25 season. And Matt Painter has a good squad in front of him, but quickly, let's go back and just review last season. So, the Boilermakers, after getting bounced in the first round of the NCAA tournament, turned around and put themselves in position to make a deep tournament run. And they changed some things about their team last year to make them a little bit more formidable in the tournament. And most notably, I would say that was getting a guy like Lance Jones, who could create his own shot, didn't necessarily shoot it great at Purdue, but had his moments, but most importantly could really defend and could get out in transition, brought a different element to the team that they didn't have the year before, when a lot was put on the shoulders of freshman Braden Smith to handle the ball for the Boilermakers. And so they got Zach Edey back, and there was a lot of expectations on this team, and honestly, I felt like they really lived up to them. They went, 35-5, 17-3, first in the Big Ten. They went 1-1 in the Big Ten tournament, and then 5-1 in the NCAA tournament, losing to national champion UConn in the final. And they had a great run. And Zach Edey was the most dominant player in college basketball last season. So obviously there's going to be big shoes to fill this season, both literally and figuratively. And this is going to be a different Boilermakers team. So as mentioned, Zach Edey's out. Also, Lance Jones is gone. Mason Gillis and Ethan Morton both transferred out for their final years of eligibility here. And so you've lost, in Edey, Gillis, and Morton, three guys who have been, the staple of this team, the spine of the team, if you will, who've just been in the program for a number of years now, 4+ years. And 4 years, really. And, just were really relied upon by Coach Painter. He knew he could trust those guys. Granted, Ethan Morton's minutes certainly dipped. And Mason Gillis came off the bench. But they were guys that Coach Painter could certainly rely on. And so this year, there's definitely going to be a shift. But they also brought back a ton of guys who were part of the team last season. And most notably, that's your backcourt of Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer, who had really good seasons last year. Braden Smith, in particular, 12 points a game, 7.5 assists, and almost 6 rebounds, over 1.5 steals per game. I think the rebounds were certainly affected by having Zach Edey. It made it a little bit easier for a guy like Braden Smith to come back and get rebounds. So I wouldn't be surprised if that number goes down next season. But they also got Trey Kaufman-Renn back, who I think is going to be their second most important player this season. I think he's going to be even more important than Fletcher Lawyer, just because he's their most talented big right now, and he can play either the power forward position or the center spot, depending on how things work out for Coach Painter and how he wants to utilize the talent on his roster. Camden Heidi's back. He had some flashes last season. Also, Caleb First, who started games the year before, came off the bench last season. And then Miles Colvin, who definitely showed some flashes as a guard off the bench. And Will Berg, who's a legit 7-footer, who will be in competition this year with one of the new guys. And really, they didn't bring in any transfers as far as I saw. Let me know if I have that wrong in the comments below. But they brought in 7'3" center Daniel Jacobson, and the guard in Jakari Harris. So you've got 7 guys coming back from last year's team. They do have a 5-man class, but these are the 2 guys in the top 100 according to 24/7 Sports. So I think those are the 9 guys that are going to be competing for minutes for Purdue. So with that being said, we went over the roster changes here. Now let's move into what I think is going to be the projected lineup and rotation for the Boilermakers. So I think it's pretty obvious your backcourt is going to be Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer, and Trey Kaufman-Renn is going to start. So you've got those 3 guys that I think are you could put them in Sharpie, right? Those guys are definitely going to start. After that, though, it gets interesting because there's, of the remaining 6 players, I think to an extent 4 or 5 of them have legitimate arguments that they should be starting. And it just depends on what direction Coach Painter wants to go in. I think, though, this is just my guess, that we're going to be looking at a starting lineup to start the season of Camden Heide at the 3 and Caleb First at center. And the reason for that is because I think they're going to want a little bit more size. Last year they had the 3-guard lineup, but they had Zach Edey. They don't have Zach Edey in essence because I don't necessarily think Will Berg or Daniel Jacobson are going to be ready to start the season. Could be wrong. Could definitely be wrong. And that's going to be, what we'll find out really at the start of the season. But my guess is that they won't be. And so he'll start Caleb First because the year prior, he did trust him to start games. So I think he'll start with Trey Kaufman-Renn in the front court. And so Camden Heide will be in there to also provide size that they'll lose because they won't have that big traditional 7-foot-plus guy that they would usually have. Otherwise, though, guys who I think could start would be Miles Colvin. I could see him starting instead of Camden Heide. And then Will Berg or Daniel Jacobson, I think, could start at that center spot instead of Caleb First. And that's something we'll just have to wait and see. But I think certainly all 8 of those players will be in the rotation. The only guy that may or may not be in it is, I would say, Jakari Harris. But I do think, Matt Painter, Coach Painter, has liked to play a little bit deeper rotations in the past, as he did last season at least. So I do think there's a decent chance that Jakari Harris is in the rotation and gets somewhere between 8 to 10 minutes a game next season. So moving ahead to the schedule and predictions for next season with Purdue. Non-conference, they have some good quality non-conference matchups. Most notably, I would say, the matchup against Alabama at home, which is going to be a great matchup. They played last season, and Purdue was able to get the win. Very different teams, though, this year, so I think I would honestly probably favor Alabama, but I know you Boilermaker fans are definitely going to be loud at home, so I think it's a good matchup early on to test this newly constructed team, without the big man in the middle. They play on the road at Marquette, and then they play in this tournament in San Diego, where I had seen that they were playing NC State, but I've also seen on another site that Arkansas is part of that tournament. Maybe that was prior to Calipari taking over, so maybe that's shifted. But there's also BYU and Ole Miss, so definitely could get a solid game out there. Not like a top 25 opponent, depending on Arkansas, but top 50, top 60 games for sure. Good early tests again. They also play Texas A&M in Indianapolis, and they have a road game at Auburn. So the bookends are the games against Alabama in Auburn, which are certainly going to test a not new Purdue team, but there's guys who are going to be in elevated roles that they weren't in last season. Conference games. You've got Indiana, Michigan, and Rutgers as your home and away games. Three opponents that on paper heading into next season look to be really good games. Good, tough matchups. Indiana and Michigan, reconstructed with the transfer portal. Rutgers, obviously, with the 2 really talented freshmen coming in. So those look like great games on paper. At home, they'll play Maryland, Nebraska, Northwestern, Ohio State, UCLA, USC, and Wisconsin. And on the road, they'll take on Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, Michigan State, Oregon, Penn State, and Washington. So, with all of that being said, how do I think Purdue's going to fare in the regular season? In previous videos, I've gone a step further and looked at the NCAA tournament, but after reflecting upon that, I think the NCAA tournament can be a little bit of a crapshoot in terms of luck and draw. So, just going to predict out how they'll do in the regular season, and we'll leave it at that. So last year, they went 28-3 in the regular season. So I gotta say, I don't think they'll be quite that good this season. Losing Zach Edey, losing a guy like Lance Jones, and even Mason Gillis. So After going 28-3 last season, I'm going to bring them down to 23-7. I think they'll lose a couple more games in the non-conference portion. And I think they'll lose, let's say, 3 games in the non-conference and 4 in the conference slate, which would still be a very good season, 23 and... Actually, the math's wrong. I'm sorry. There would have to be 23-8 to get 31 games. So I think they'll lose 3 games non-conference, 5 games in conference. I think it's a really tough slate, the Big Ten, this season. And I think the team is a notch below. And again, I hate to harp on it, but you're losing the most dominant player in college basketball. You're going to take a step back. I just think that it just makes sense. So still think it's a very good team. 23-8 is a very good team. And Purdue is going to, give a lot of teams a test next season. So I think it's a good team. It'll be fun to watch next year, how the pieces fit together. How does Braden Smith do? Can Trey Kaufman-Renn take a leap? So these are all things that are going to be fun to look forward to next season for Purdue fans. Let me know in the comments, what do you guys think about Purdue? What other teams you want to see me profile ahead of the season? Please subscribe to the channel, like this video. It helps us grow. See you guys next time.